This is a video for a Spring Boot starter project to illustrate a simple Java REST API application. To begin with, we create a project called BaatCheet Kannada using Spring Starter IO kit. We configure it to produce a WAR file. We are using Java version 8. And we add the dependencies Spring Web, Spring Data JPA and MySQL driver. We are creating a database of one English sentence and one Kannada sentence. So there's a simple table called content with content ID, content underscore Kannada, content underscore English. So this is the MySQL schema, and we are going to create a database called BaatCheet Kannada 2. We will use that BaatCheet Kannada 2, and programmatically through Java Spring Boot we will create the database. For this, we need to point the application to the right MySQL resource by configuring application.properties. So you use port number 3306 localhost, and BaatCheet Kannada is the database, and the username is root, the password is also root, and then we have a Hibernate DDL auto. It can take two arguments, either create or update. The first time we need to have create. Now we create a package to create a model class. The model class will have the model package will have the entity class. The entity class will have the attributes of the entity and the methods for the entity. So we have a annotation called entity, and then within the class we have an annotation for ID to represent the functionality of the primary key. Generated value is another annotation. Within that annotation we need to put strategy is equal to generation type dot identity. This represents the auto increment functionality of the primary key. Then for each of the columns we have a separate declaration: at column content ID, at column content in Kannada, and at column content in English. We import the required packages so that it compiles. Now using right click we can get the command for generating the getters and setter methods for all the three attributes. So the model class, the entity class is ready. We are now creating the repository interface which extends the JPA repository. It has two arguments. One is the content, which is part of the entity class, and the other is integer because we're dealing with the primary key. Now we create a controller class. The controller class is having the REST controller as the annotation. Within the class we also followed with the request mapping. This can be optional. In this case we are writing value is equal to content. Within the class we have auto wired annotation followed by the content repository object creation. Content repository and lowercase content repository, that's the object of the repository interface. The post mapping is to now send a HTTP post request to the server through POSTMAN. Here the route is add content. There's no need for a space between add and content. We create a method called add content method. which will take the argument as annotation request body followed by content and object content. Content, which is the entity class, followed by the object of the entity class. This shall have a method where the repository is saved, and what is saved? The content object is saved in the repository. This will create an insert statement into the database, and as an acknowledgement we return a string called inserted. So with this we have, if you pass a suitable argument to the get to the post method, it will get inserted into the database. To verify this, we can run this code and see if the data is actually getting inserted into the database. So in Postman we have created a post method, and in body we select raw, choose the type as JSON, and create two inputs. One is content in Kannada and content in English, and we send the data to the server. Now we can go to the MySQL and check the tables and see whether the tables have got populated with the content that we just sent now. So we have successfully now tested the post method. We now need to create a get method, get HTTP method. So we need a get mapping, and the route shall be view content. In the case of view content, you don't send any parameters to the server, instead you request parameters for the server. So the response will be in the form of a list. So we have public list content. We are now creating the view content method, wherein we fetch the contents of the repository and direct it to a list, so that we can get all the mapped Kannada and English content as a list. So we are creating a new get request with parameter as view content, and when we send it, we get the output as a list of words in English and Kannada.